smiled, her voice dripping with a terrifying kind of satisfaction as she passed the mashed potatoes. My golden child brother, Tyler, smirked from across the table, already eyeing my bedroom to turn into his personal gym. They had spent months fabricating lies, turning my extended family against me, and manipulating my inheritance out from under my feet. They thought they were kicking a broken-hearted girl out onto the streets with nothing but a suitcase. But as Mom took a smug sip of her wine, I calmly reached into my bag. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, I slid a single, crisp legal document across the polished mahogany table. Yours too, I replied softly. Mom's smile froze. She read it once. Then she read it again, the color draining completely from her face until she looked like a ghost. Her hands began to shake violently, knocking her wine glass over, staining the white tablecloth blood red. You can't do this, she shrieked, her voice cracking with pure terror. But it was already done. Hi, I'm Chloe. Follow my story until the end to see exactly how greedy people trap themselves. How far my story has reached. The funeral flowers had barely withered when the atmosphere in our home shifted from grief to cold calculation. My father, Arthur, had been the anchor of this family, a brilliant businessman who built a successful logistics company from the ground up. I'm Chloe, and for the last 5 years, I was the one pulling 80-hour weeks right beside him, learning the ropes and keeping the gears turning while my mother, Eleanor, and my older brother, Tyler, treated his hard work like an endless ATM. Tyler, at 32, was a master of grand illusions, always wearing tailored suits paid for by Dad, driving luxury sports cars, and pretending to run high-level consultancies that never actually generated a single dime of profit. Mom worshipped the ground Tyler walked on. To her, he could do no wrong, while my constant sacrifices for the business were merely my duty as a daughter. After Dad's sudden heart attack, I threw myself into protecting his legacy, assuming we were all grieving together. I was completely blind to the rot spreading right under our roof. The illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. I had returned home early from the office to grab a folder of quarterly reports from Dad's old home study. As I approached the heavy oak doors, I heard muffled voices inside. It was Mom and Tyler, speaking in low, urgent tones. If we structure the transfer this way, Chloe won't see a single cent from the primary estate, Tyler whispered, a sharp, greedy edge to his voice. Are you certain the paperwork is airtight, darling? Mom replied, her voice completely devoid of the maternal warmth she usually faked. She thinks she's running the company, but I want her out of my sight, and out of this house the moment the probate court clears the deeds. My blood turned to ice. Standing in the hallway, clutching my briefcase, I realized the terrifying truth. My own mother and brother weren't just mourning. They were actively plotting to destroy my life and erase me from my father's legacy entirely. I forced myself to breathe silently, taking a step back into the shadows of the hallway as the office door remained shut. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. If my time in the business world had taught me anything, it was that emotion ruins leverage. Instead, I quietly walked back out to my car, my mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I needed proof. The next morning, I used my administrative access at the logistics firm to dig into our corporate banking portals and estate files. What I uncovered was a calculated nightmare. Over the past 3 months, Mom had abused her temporary position as the estate's co-executor. Guided by Tyler, she had systematically drained $450,000 from my personal corporate trust fund, money Dad had locked away for my future. Even worse, they had quietly filed forged quitclaim deeds with a corrupt family lawyer, attempting to transfer the entire title of our $2 million Sacramento home and the business infrastructure solely into Tyler's name. They were preparing to strip me of my job, my home, and my savings in one swift, legal execution. Instead of panicking, a strange, icy clarity took over. I realized they were entirely relying on an old copy of Dad's estate plan from a decade ago. They thought they were being brilliant, but their blinding greed had made them incredibly sloppy. They didn't know that Dad had updated his security protocols 6 months before his passing. I closed the laptop, a slow smile finally spreading across my face. I would play the part of the unsuspecting, grieving daughter perfectly, until the trap snapped shut. For the next 2 weeks, I played my part to perfection. I wore the exhaustion of grief on my face, letting my shoulders slump whenever Mom or Tyler walked into a room. I wanted them entirely convinced that I was weak, oblivious, and thoroughly defeated by the weight of running the firm alone. They fell for it completely. Tyler began walking around the house with a smug, insufferable swagger, while Mom treated me like an unwanted housekeeper in my own home. The climax arrived on a rainy Thursday evening. Mom texted me earlier in the day, insisting I come home early for a mandatory family meeting over dinner. When I walked into the formal dining room, the atmosphere was suffocatingly triumphant. The table was meticulously set with our finest china, silver candle holders gleamed, and Bianca, Tyler's incredibly superficial wife, sat beside him looking like she had already won the lottery. Mom sat at the head of the table, pouring herself a fresh glass of expensive Chardonnay, her eyes gleaming with a malicious kind of joy. As we sat down, no one passed the food. The air was thick with malice. Tyler didn't even look at me. He was busy drawing up sketches on a napkin, casually detailing how he planned to tear down my late father's rose garden to construct a custom 5-car garage. Mom set her glass down with a soft, intentional click. "This is your last meal in this house," Mom smiled, her voice dripping with terrifying satisfaction. "The deeds have cleared, Chloe. You have until sunrise to pack your bags and get out." Tyler smirked from across the table, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, waiting for the tears, the begging, the dramatic breakdown. Bianca didn't even pretend to look sympathetic. She just pulled out her phone, ready to record my humiliation. They thought they had backed a helpless, broke girl into a corner. But I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I merely reached into my leather briefcase, resting on the floor beside me. The room fell perfectly silent as I pulled out a single, crisp legal document, printed on heavy bond paper, stamped with a bright red, official corporate seal. With absolute calm, I slid that single paper directly across the polished mahogany table, stopping it right in front of my mother's wine glass. "Yours too," I replied softly, my voice completely steady. Mom's smug smile instantly froze on her face. Her brow furrowed in utter confusion as her eyes scanned the top of the page. She read the first paragraph once. Then she read it again, her jaw dropping open. In a matter of seconds, the color drained completely from her face, leaving her looking utterly ghostly. Her hands began to shake so violently that she knocked her wine glass over. The dark, expensive Chardonnay rushed across the table, staining the pristine white linen tablecloth a deep, blood red, but no one cared about the mess. You can't do this," she shrieked, her voice cracking with pure terror as she looked up at me. "Oh, it's already done, Eleanor," I said. Tyler slammed his fists on the table, snatching the paper out of Mom's trembling hands. "What is this garbage?" he roared, his eyes darting across the text. But as his gaze landed on the official legal stamps, his aggressive posture instantly collapsed. "You see, Tyler," I said, leaning back comfortably in my chair, "you and Mom should have checked the company bylaws before you started forging quitclaim deeds." I explained the brutal legal reality they had completely overlooked. The primary estate and the logistics company didn't actually belong to Mom. Thanks to a hidden poison pill Claw's dad had integrated into his final will revisions 6 months ago, any attempted fraudulent transfer or embezzlement of corporate funds by a co-executor triggered an immediate, automatic forfeiture of their entire inheritance. By filing those forged documents to strip me of my rights, Mom had legally disqualified herself from the estate entirely. But that wasn't even the best part. In their desperate rush to grab the business assets, Tyler had blindly signed an omnibus assumption agreement prepared by their corrupt lawyer. They thought they were transferring pure profit, but instead, they had legally tied themselves to the company's hidden liabilities. Tyler had unknowingly legally assumed over $1.5 million in high-interest corporate debt that he himself had secretly accumulated through his failed shell companies over the years. The document I slid across the table was a formal asset freeze and an immediate eviction notice. They hadn't stolen my inheritance. They had legally bankrupted themselves while handing me total control. The dining room erupted into pure, unadulterated chaos. Tyler's face turned an ugly shade of purple as he jumped his feet, knocking his heavy dining chair backward onto the hardwood floor. "This is a setup. You manipulated the books, you little snake," he screamed, his voice cracking as he pointed a trembling finger at me. Bianca scrambled backward, her smug expression replaced by a look of sheer panic as she realized her luxurious lifestyle was evaporating in real time. Mom threw herself across the table, her manicured hands clutching at the red-stained tablecloth. "Chloe, please. You're misunderstanding everything," she begged, her voice instantly shifting into a pathetic, desperate whine. "We only did this to protect the family assets. Think about your father's memory. Think about family harmony." "Family harmony?" I asked, my voice cutting through their hysterics like a razor blade. "Where was that harmony when you tried to throw me out on the street 3 days after Dad was buried?" James Mitchell, my new attorney, chose that exact moment to step out from the shadows of the foyer and into the dining room, holding a thick leather folder. I stood up, looking down at my defeated mother and brother, and delivered my final ultimatum. "You have 2 choices," I said coldly. "Either you sign these complete release forms, surrendering by sunrise, or my attorney hands this entire file over to the district attorney for immediate corporate fraud, forgery, and embezzlement charges. You have